Well, hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Stockbridge Library, Museum, and Archives online poetry series. We are in season 3, and we're delighted to be welcoming back P. Scott Cunningham. Our theme this season is inquiry and the power of poetry in posing and answering questions for the poet themselves and for the readers as well. Before we get started, I do want to thank John Gillespie. John started this series for us at the library back when COVID first started. We thought we'd do a few weeks during that first poetry month, and here we are finishing up season 3, John. So thank you for bringing so much poetry into our lives. And our reader today and poet is P. Scott Cunningham. He's the author of Ya Te Veo from University of Arkansas Press in 2018, which was selected by Billy Collins for the Miller-Williams Poetry Series. His writing has appeared in The Nation, The All, Harvard Review, American Poetry Review, Poetry, Gulf Coast, as well as many other publications. He also has translated some works. He's a graduate of Wesleyan University. He is the founder and director of Oh Miami, which is a nonprofit organization that celebrates Miami through the lens of poetry. And he was named one of 20 under 40 emerging South Florida leaders by the Miami Herald. So that is just one of many of his distinctions and accomplishments. Scott, we're so delighted to have you here with us today. Thank you for joining us. And now I'd like to turn the program over to you, John, and to you, Scott. Thank you.
And Wendy, thank you, and thank the library for hosting this. And Scott, thank you for not wearing your Miami Heat jersey. I'm still in mourning for total basketball ineptitude. The Boston Globe ripped these guys like, it was like someone took a knife and just cut them all open and just let their guts spill on the floor. Yeah, they were. And of course, Boston fans love that when you trash your, we've had so many times when we've lost. So when you trash your team, there's this super piling on effect. Yeah, just before nuclear, it just accumulates. No, thanks for being with us again. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. So what does inquiry mean to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I love that as a theme because I think that's the theme of every poem, or should be anyway. I mean, I think if you come to a poem with answers or things that you already want to say, it's maybe the wrong approach, and I think it's hard to get somewhere in a poem that way. So for me, it's inquiry, I think, is the starting point and the end point of every poem. The composer John Adams, in an interview one time, someone asked him, what does this composition mean? And his response is, well, if I knew what it meant, I wouldn't have bothered writing it, and that really resonates with me. I mean, I think you have to go into it wanting to discover something, and if you're not doing that, then why are you putting all this work into it? Because it's writing poems it's too much work to not have that kind of payoff involved.
So let me just play this out for a minute. So if you're writing, is there a question you're wrestling with? Or there are times when all of a sudden it's just your pen comes alive or whatever, and it starts writing its own question?
I think it's both. I mean, I think you come into it, there has to be something that leads you into it. But that could be an image, it could be a word, it could be a movie, it could be anything, just something that for whatever reason feels like you should be moving towards it in some way. And then once you get into the poem, I think the challenge is always, and I think this is always hard, even when you know it's what you have to do, which is just letting the poem's brain take over and see where it wants to go, and not be prescriptive and like telling the poem what to do once you get into it, but let the poem speak and breathe and go where it wants to go.
I'm sure you've had poems that you start with one question, and all of a sudden it twists around to another question.
Yeah.
I mean, does that baffle you? Does this like, wait a second, I was asking what color the sky was, and now you're telling me what the prices are at the grocery store.
Yeah.
It's a bad analogy,
Yeah.
but
No, I totally understand the question. And it's true. Yeah, it baffles me, but it also, it's frustrating. I mean, sometimes you really want a poem to be the thing that you told it to be at the beginning, and it just refuses to do it. It just won't go there for whatever reason. And you can, flog it all you want. It's not going to listen to you. And so, yeah, I mean, but that sort of journey is, I mean, ultimately, I think like submitting to it is both the challenge and the reward.
so, if you were, which you're not going to do, were rating your poems, were those where you had to kind of struggle and wrestle with the poem? Do they become more impactful for you? I mean, some things probably just come out, but I think it's the things where you really have to work it. It's like, it's all of a sudden, it's like you've got an old car that you all shined up and it's all tuned up and
Yeah. Yeah, it's, they come all different ways. I mean, and sometimes, yeah, when you make a breakthrough on something that just wasn't working, it is really satisfying, and you do feel attached to it. But I think all of us as poets are super attached to whatever the most recent breakthrough was. It's like the shiniest thing in the cabinet is the one that you're really attracted to, because that's the one that for whatever reason just started working. And it takes a long time. And you're right, some things do work right away, and it's just a matter of like touching them up. But most of the time I write a draft and then I try not to touch it for a while. I kind of let it just sit, and get out of whatever moment I was in when I wrote it, and then come back to it and see what's there. And sometimes there's not anything there, but sometimes I don't find out what was there for years. I mean, I've written poems that, basically failed for 10 years. And then one day, like, I was like, oh, I know what to do with that, and then it goes somewhere else.
let me just ask you one more question, then I want to hear some of your poems. We all do. So when you're having your shiny object experience, are you going back in your draft and basically saying, oh man, I got to rewrite those 8 stanzas? I'm just wondering if the shiny thing just makes everything backwards, like you get the eraser out or you.
Yeah. I mean, I think you try to hone in on where the energy is in the poem, and kind of use that as your roadmap, because there's always, I think, in anything you feel like is worth working on, there's at least one place that if you did like a heat map of the poem is really red, like for whatever reason, there's something happening there that resonates with you and is urging you onward. And so, yeah, sometimes the process is just get rid of everything else, just deal with that hot section and see where that takes you. But it's, that's the thing about writing poems, is like once you think you have a method for doing it, it all of a sudden doesn't work anymore. You have to like relearn how to do it all over again. There's no like magic brush that just makes everything come out all right all the time.
Yeah, I think I'm appreciating, I think there are poetic gods in the universe that
Yeah.
look down on poets and just decide, Scott Cunningham is too confident. We're just going to like mess him up today. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if the gods just feel like, let me slap his head and see what he thinks about that.
No, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, there's if anyone saw that movie Soul, the Pixar movie, I have kids, so
Yeah.
I watch a lot of Pixar movies. And there's a part where there's a soul where they kind of describe this like this sort of consciousness that people go into. It's like when a
Yeah.
jazz musician's really into it, are they really on Earth,
Yeah.
or are they somewhere else? And the little soul talks about how she just messes with people like when they're in that zone, and takes them out of it. And yeah, it does feel like there is some force like that is like, you know what, for today it's gonna work, and tomorrow it might not.
Yeah. Great. So why don't you share some of your work with us?
All right. So I'm going to be reading all poems from a new manuscript I'm working on, which is all about Miami and Florida. So yeah, so I think the format is that I read a few and then we talk again and then I read a few more. Is that right, John?
Yep.
Okay, great. So the first one, so that, true to our discussion, this poem came from a tweet that I saw in 2018, which was from Spin Magazine, which I think is no longer a thing, but they were still tweeting, at least in 2018. And the title was like an article that had come out, which was called "Here the Offspring and 311 Cover Each Other's Hits." And if you don't know who the Offspring and 311 are, they are very 90s bands that I listened to in the 90s and haven't really listened to since. So this is "Here the Offspring and 311 Cover Each Other's Hits." I can't help it. I'm always already driving down Military Trail, listening to the Offspring or 311, the CD pulled slowly into its slot like a sunset. Or it's 90 degrees in December, and I'm wearing Doc Martens and a flannel, the one speckled yellow and purple, the sight of me leaving an ornate sunset. The sound you hear is a mosquito, or it's a bulldozer tearing down Beau's U-Pick, the Boca Mall, La Vieille Maison. That's French for "you missed the sunset." My palm was created to hold a bottle of Zima, the cord of a landline, the wheel of a two-door Honda. Dear October in Meisner Plaza, I miss your sunsets. I don't know who tells the tide to obey the seawall's edge, what keeps the row of sea grapes from being crushed by the weight of the sunset. No one wants the last house on the street, the one pushed up against the highway's retaining wall, a fluorescent bulb instead of a sunset. Our house licks its wounds with water from the canal out back. From my perch on the roof, I watch a sugar fire cook up a brackish sunset. I watch the mangroves walk north together, their smell overpowering the smoke. I feel her mouth hit mine, and what is that taste, if not the sunset? Our diving board is the train bridge that crosses over the Hillsborough Canal. We wait for the horn, the light through the pines, then outrace the sunset. In Florida, breathing means swallowing, as if the sky were being poured. The flood they talk about already happened. Drowning predates the sunset. Pushed aside like fallen snow, water in the peninsula piles up in pools, in ponds, in coolers. It says, wait, I'm not done yet. To love this state, you have to divest yourself from tomorrow, bail out your hope, slow your heart rate to the sunsets. They'll build strip malls here until the town loses its name, and then landless, they'll incorporate the sunset. I'll leave enough sweat behind that the fish will call me father. My billboard says, every burial in Florida, an inverted sunset. I don't need to hear the Offspring and 311 cover each other's hits. I witnessed the dawn. I don't want to see the sunset.
Wow.
Thanks. I should have said that poem is kind of like a modified ghazal, which is an Arabic form that I'm really in love with. And there's a poet named Agha Shahid Ali who died in the early part of the 2000s who is kind of like the master of the ghazal in English. And I'm a huge fan of his. So I was just trying to do some portion of what he does.
Yeah, I think there was like you put 500 miles on the car at that poem.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, I like the mangoes. I like the mangoes. The mangoes come alive, whatever. Yeah.
Well, if you like mangoes, you're gonna like the next poem because it's all about mangoes.
Oh boy, here we go.
So this next poem, I have a series of poems that I'm working on that are all called, they have a similar title. They're all called My Heart, aka something, and that something is always something in Miami. So they're all like descriptive poems about something in Miami, but they're also, a kind of, internal inquiry of sorts. So this is My Heart, aka a mango in a suburban Florida front yard. I'll get to the tree, but first let's talk about the flagpole, how it lords over the tree with its two scarves, one red, one yellow, a pantomime of a plant, growing two pieces of limp, inedible fruit. Without a breeze, the flags hang inscrutable and silent, more animal-like perhaps in how they seem to be lying in wait, prepared to strike, snake-like in that you only have to see the combination of colors to know the species. Below the flags, and more voluminous, the tree spills out wide, its fruit dangling from thin wires like Christmas ornaments, so many that it seems like the tree may perhaps destroy itself through generosity. The weight of the flesh and its juice pulling the whole enterprise back down into the sand from which it rose. But it doesn't fall or break. The tree bears the responsibility it creates and year after year feeds anyone with tongue or hand.
Wow. Very nice.
Thanks. And so this is another one of those. This is My Heart, aka Florida Furniture. Florida Furniture was a store on Northwest 2nd Avenue and 79th Street. And like a lot of things It's no longer there. I wrote this poem in 2019 and the store's already gone.
What kind of furniture was it?
I don't know. I'd say in the
Oh,
poem
you don't
that,
know? You just like the sign outside?
I loved the facade of the store and I used to drive by it all the time. Yeah. So, and I say that in the poem, you'll see. My heart, aka Florida Furniture. You're just around the corner, but I've never been inside. I have no idea what's hanging on your walls, what colors, what's tchotchkes. The sign out front says Florida Furniture, but I don't know what that means. Is that a style or merely a statement of fact, since all furniture in Florida is technically Florida Furniture? Do you make it yourself? Do you gather it from other places? Has it all been discarded, picked up from alleys and curbs on trash days, maybe touched up, a loose leg tightened, some light upholstery work where the stuffing crawls out? How many lives, how many hands must brush against it before it becomes Floridian, before it abandons association with any other state? How much sun? How much rain? Is it Floridian from conception, or does it have to break first to feel like it has a home, for it to feel like it belongs in a place that only welcomes people in who are first willing to promise that they'll leave?
Oh, sounds like a story you may not want to go into. You probably made a good choice. Stay outside the store.
And this one is, there's also a series of odes in the book to things that are, I guess, Floridian in one capacity or another. So this is called Ode to Sea Level. Ode actually to me when my eyes are level, which they always are, with the sea's lip, my mouth and nostrils underwater, the fluid in my ears sloshing at the same height and rhythm as the ocean all around me. To be, as I always am, no higher than the horizon. The sun, when it rises, meeting me iris to iris, then it's over my head before I can blink. I'm flat against the world, which is to say, I'm shore, I'm sand, washed up, deposited by the tide, and intermittently, at its whim, pulled back and thrown across the tectonic plate. Shallow marks on my torso where my skin pokes through the limestone, a pattern of reef like a tattoo of its holes, the past and the future squeezing through. Altitude sickness on a lifeguard stand, I demand no basements, no places a clear cell signal can be found, no views except for those a crab can comprehend. The wind is much a myth as what a bird feels with wings outspread, heights horror. To have no nest except those that harbor the eggs of sea turtles. You know that crawl across the beach that the younglings perform, led by the moon, back into the warm vein of the water's current? That's me every morning when I wake up on a bed's dizzying plateau. I want nowhere to go where the water isn't going to. No incline, no pitch, no rim to clear and feel falsely like I'm above it all. My level is in it, wherein it is the earth in all its sinkingness, all its muck and saw and marl and slip. You climb up, I'll be here, floating at the heightless level of light as it appears, needle by needle, sewing me to the spot where the tide arrives, and might rise, but then recoils. No more trying to cover the land than my heart is trying to beat its way out of my chest. I float, so how could the ocean ascend without me? I am its remora, paying my rent by growing this organism whose flesh feeds the plankton, the shrimp, the hogfish that bleeds every time the world's knife edge cuts the sun in two.
Wow. Amazing. So let's take a little, we have a couple breaks during the show where we have our audience ask you questions, provide some comments. So I want to encourage our listeners to unmute. As I say every show, Scott, don't let the poet off easy. This is your time to see if, well, Scott should be sweating because he's in Miami. I mean, right now in Maine, it's about 55 degrees. And yeah, it feels like it's April instead of June. So anybody have any comments or questions? Anybody? Nikki, Lauren? Carolyn keeps walking around her house. I don't know if that's like a real.
That's
who's
my
that?
mom.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, she's she trained to be a real estate agent? I think I've seen every room of the house so far.
Yeah.
Sure. Hi,
Uh,
I'm Nikki. Hi,
Hey,
nice
Nikki.
to meet you. P. Scott Cunningham. I forget. I didn't hear what you said that you like to go by, but
Anything. So it's all good.
cool. Yeah, I've been following you for a while on Instagram. And just I've heard your name a lot of times throughout, being a Miami native. And I know that you did recently that billboard competition for the zip odes, which I
Mhm.
thought was very clever and inspired a lot of people in my community. Everyone that I told about it was like, "Oh yeah, that's awesome! I'm gonna write one," and I thought that was really exciting. I guess did like, is that something that Miami came up with? You and the team came up with the zip odes?
Yeah, Zipodes, we invented the form, and then we partnered with WLRN, which is our local NPR station, which you know from living here. And yeah, so we've been collecting them for like 6 or 7 years now. And it's a really fun form because it's, it's in the shape of your zip code. So it's, you put your zip code down the left-hand side of the page, and then that's how many words per line that you have. So what's fun about it is it's about place, but it's also like the where you live is embedded into the poem and into the form. So that allows us to kind of see where they're coming from. And we do see that they're coming from all over Miami-Dade County, which is amazing. And so they're always so good, the poems that people write. I mean, we're always every year just blown away by the things that people write. And so we're always looking for ways to kind of share them. And our communications director, and this publicist that we work with, Marika Lynch, like together they came up with this idea of, hey, let's put one on a billboard. And what we'll do is for the first 3 weeks of the billboard, it'll just say your poem here with a link to submit, and then we'll pick one, and then we'll change the billboard over to one poem. So we did that, and what's awesome about it is the poem was only supposed to be up for 3 weeks, and it's still up, like almost 2 months later, which is amazing. And I guess it's just like, if no one buys the billboard, then they don't change it out, so you
yeah.
kind of like get more for your money. But it's really amazing too, because the person whose poem won, is born and raised in Miami, works as a librarian, and it was like her first big publication, and it's like the biggest poem in Miami, like thousands of people are seeing it. So stuff like that is it's just really satisfying and fun. And for me, just it's there's just so much talent here, and and just getting to see that is a real privilege.
Yeah, I love that. I love the poem that you chose. It was definitely, you could tell, like Miami native. I'm interested as like your background, I guess, like in from Miami or from Boca, I guess. Where are you, like, originally from Florida?
Florida, yes. I was born and raised in Boca. And then spent like 8 years outside of Florida, and then came back and moved to Miami in 2005 to go to grad school at FIU, and haven't left.
Are you a first generation Miami, like a lot of Miami natives? Are you like first generation Miami or Florida's?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my parents moved down to Florida when my mom was 8 months pregnant with me.
Cool, cool. Cool. It's cool to like be able to meet with you, and I love that you posted this. I sent it to a couple of my other friends too. So
Thank you.
yeah, I'm gonna keep an eye out for more of these. I like to, like, I like how active you are in the Florida poetry community. It's really inspiring, and I've been inspired by the work of Oh Miami and your postings quite often. So I appreciate everything that you've done for the Miami poetry community. So thank you.
No, thank you. That's really sweet of you to say it. And this series is great. They do it regularly, and there's amazing poets all the time.
And then what do you do with all the other poems that don't win? Do you do anything with those, or?
Yeah, so every year we do a reading for Zipodes where we have 40 to 50 Zipodists come and read live.
Yeah.
But
Wow,
we
that's great.
also we try to find other projects to put the poems in. I mean, we did a project with the city of Coconut Grove, where they wanted to basically put poems on lamppost banners. And so we found 100 Zippos that had been written for Coconut Grove, and we put them on lamppost banners all around Coconut Grove. So you
Wow.
could drive around and see, local poems.
That's cool. That's really cool. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Sure. I have
Yeah.
a question. So Scott, hi Scott. Zan.
Hey, Zan.
I love these poems, by the way. Just for background, Scott's a good friend of mine, and I've read a couple of these, so it's nice to see like how they've evolved over the years. I know you haven't read all the poems yet from this collection, but one kind of theme I'm noticing is this theme of like change or growth, whether it's like coming of age or a tree maturing or a sunset changing or a neighborhood changing. And what I like about these poems is that they're not, like most things you read about change, especially when it comes to Florida, they're very negative, but these are very kind of, I wouldn't say they're optimistic, but they kind of welcome change. And how do you kind of, as someone who's lived in Miami, a city that changes so often, like how do you kind of, how do these poems, I guess, kind of like reflect that or deal with that change?
Yeah, thanks, Zan. That's an awesome question. I mean, I think about it more in terms of just Miami itself, which like as you're saying, like change is just like, it's just a way of life here. Like things just do not stay the same, for better and worse. So I was more thinking, I mean, what the whole book has allowed me to do is like really just think about the place that I live and my place within it. And part of that I think is because I did not think of change as a theme in the book, but you're 100% right. But I think that's because I think like writing about this place, I love it so much and I want to accept it for the way it is instead of try and change it and make it something that it's not, or deny its true nature, or I'm really like trying to find ways to love it, and so I'm constantly looking for the silver lining and the little bits of brilliance about it. And yeah, and so I think the poems are about that, but that's also kind of like self-love, I mean, like it's hard to love yourself. It's hard to love yourself all the time. Most of us are like, the most intense critics of ourselves, and it's like being self-critical in a poem usually doesn't go anywhere. So I think like the poems are also about like trying to find the parts about myself that I love.
That's great.
Beautiful.
Thank you. So let's go back to some poems. Obviously I want to make sure we get some basketball, probably some Larry Bird kind of stories.
Yeah.
I'm
just gonna do a whole. It's a crown of sonnets about Robert Parrish.
Right? There you go. I'm liking the tone of this right now. No, I'm kidding. The chief.
Yeah. No, great player. No, so I was telling John before everybody hopped on that because the Heat are in the finals, and apologies to all the Boston Celtics fans, I'm gonna read a basketball poem. My favorite Miami Heat player is Udonis Haslem, who's the only player in the history of the league to play for one team his whole career, and that team exists in the place that he grew up. So he's the only like fully hometown player that's ever existed in the NBA, which I think is awesome. But he started his career actually in France. He was undrafted, and he went and played for a year in a town in France called Chalon-sur-Saône. I don't know how to pronounce that. Zan probably does. And it's actually the city where photography was invented. And so I wrote a poem about that year of Udonis Haslem's life where he's in France, and sort of like dreaming about coming back to his home in Miami. And the poem is a form that I invented called a compact poem. So it's in two parts, and it's sort of like a compact, it's like a mirror compact, like for makeup, where like the two halves mirror each other. So you might.
And hasn't he been on the team for like 19 years or something?
Yeah, 19 or 20. Yeah, his entire career. Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah. Okay, so this is Udonis Haslem in France. The moon is out, and in the wrong part of the sky, which takes up not half my view, but 9/10 of it. The clouds like herds, the stars like fieldstones. Sometimes a handful of birds gets tossed around the cosmos like a set of dice. I sleep all day to stay on the time it is on the street where I was born. If I never see the sun in France, it means I never left Miami. It means my skin is frozen until Florida thaws me out like a grove of orange trees. Did you know the freeze can save the harvest too? I never ate an orange until I left Miami. I never saw the moon until I came to this place where photography was invented. When I'm up at night alone, I think about the first time a man saw his own image rising from paper, his own face but thinner, weightless, appearing like time itself, remembering night's loneliness, a man being invented by another's waking. There it is, the moon. I never saw it until I left Miami. Its light tastes like an orange painted on a wall. The harvest freezes what we thought we'd lost as the trees open up their oranges. Florida is my skin. How could I ever leave it for another sun, another country, another continent? Unborn until I return, I rewrite every street. Time sleeps all day with me. I live in a paradise obscured by the light of stars. I pick up a handful of letters from home, heavier than stones, read 9/10 of each, then let the sky read the remainder. If the sun is out, the moon is wrong.
Wow.
Um,
Now, does he
So-
know has he read that poem? Does he know that there's a poem about him or?
I don't think he has. No, I don't think he has. It's been published online. So if he's Googling himself, maybe he'd find it. But I have
Yeah.
a feeling Udonis Haslam's not the kind of guy who Googles himself. So
Yeah.
yeah, maybe I'll get it to him one day. So I'm gonna
I
read
don't know.
two
Five
more.
games left. 5 games left.
5 games left. Yeah, that's true. Maybe it'll be a retirement gift, you know.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
So I'm gonna read two more. One short one, and then one. It's not long, but it's like slightly longer than the first one. So this is called so if you don't know, the Miami Airport, the code for Miami Airport is MIA. So that's yeah.
That says it all. Yeah,
It
yeah.
really does. It really does. So this poem is called When I Arrive at MIA, I Know I'm Home. I step off the plane and smell the humidity, the canal, the marl, the horizon's ubiquity. Did the sun come out? That's just my publicity. No road in Miami leads toward humility. Swamp, land, ocean, it's all the same city. They say that we're sinking. I call it fluidity. When I die, I'll break apart, irreducibly. The crypt isn't coming. I invest in liquidity. The road disappears, and I feel the fluidity, the drains overflowing, the water's publicity. The sky turns blue, and that's the ocean's ubiquity. No horizon in Miami leads toward the city. They say that we're dying. I call it humility. One day the sun will explode. I'll miss the humidity.
Here we go. Very nice. A lot of fun with that one.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with that one writing it.
Yeah.
And so the last one is after a poet again whose name I can't pronounce. Fayez Ahmed Fayez is the way I think it's pronounced. Who is a poet translated by Aga Shahid Ali, which is how I found him. And just a really beautiful, amazing poet. So this poem, which will be the last one I read, is called Florida Prayer. Raise me. Bring me up to break bread in the last booth in the newest chain restaurant tucked into a bed of monstera bushes and irrigated medians. Lock me up in your long, waterlogged dungeon of highways and parking lots. Drop me like a blank note into a bottle filled with gasoline and thrown into the sea. Immobilize me with precision. Run me sideways into the guardrail, over the side and into the canal where the pythons find me waiting, soft and pliable as a baby deer. Be my keeper with a leash, my crooked warden with an unchecked fiefdom. Pull me closer with the fierceness of an undertow at a crowded beach when the lifeguard is distracted by his phone. Reject my application for a fair and just amount of years. Donate my body to the moment when the bartender calls out last call and the man who has no home mutters to no one, This is my home, and I don't know how to leave. Show me where the light goes when the neon sparks and the letters go dark. Scatter me to the chatter of katydids, the whoop of sirens, the trill of engines calling out in the twilight for the fluorescence of their mates. Be my 6-car pileup, my end place, my cul-de-sac, the shallow strip of shimmer I'll be found face down in, not looking up to the sky, but sipping you, my oracle, through the mouths of my eyes. Wash me away, then pull me back. Drag me across the mass of cement and sawgrass. Flip me, unseason me, soak me in your spilled colognes, your subprime mortgages, your solemn promises made with fingers crossed. Coat my heart in guava and traffic cones. Toss me like a handful of ships into the horizon's flattened heartbeat. Bury me in your brand new land haphazardly, beside an unreturned shopping cart, a scratch-off ticket, a pair of stonewashed jeans ripped on purpose in a far-off factory. And when the ocean comes to claim me, let my bones wash out like bits of plastic. Let them catch on the knobby knees of mangroves and never be found by kids on field trips, futilely cleaning up the shoreline. Let me be the wings of ants cast off in the swarm, littered on the linoleum of a one-bedroom apartment where the cops discover the sliding glass door thrown off its hinges and a half-naked couple in bed, stabbed to nothing, but still holding one another, still lost in the reverie of being. Florida, you've never saved anyone. Don't start with me.
Okay, I'm going to skip Florida on my next. Now, we lived in DC for 10 years. That's about as far south. Yeah, that was like, yeah. That was like, okay, that's it. I've reached my internal Mason-Dixon line of humidity.
Yeah. No, I get it. I mean, I'm a creature of the subtropical, so I get like knowing where your like longitudinal line is, or your latitude rather.
Well, that's why I'm up in Maine. I moved it
Yeah.
like 600 miles up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk about before everyone came on the show a few years ago, Scott did this kind of basketball poetry event, and you could show them the book Ballers. It'd be great to just talk about that because that was the one thing that I kind of wanted to attend that I couldn't. I had a conflict. So
yeah, I mean, we did this like online reading back when that was kind of like all you could do was online readings. And then we made this zine. It's called Ballers 2K20. So kind of like whenever they introduce a new like basketball video game, it's like named after the year. So that was kind of the idea. And Zan has a poem in this, by the way. And so yeah, it's just a bunch of poems about basketball and kind of trying to tap into this phenomenon, which is poets who love basketball. It's like weirdly the Venn diagram is like almost a circle of like poets and poets who love basketball. It's like just seems like, I don't know, for whatever reason they love it. So yeah, we've done it twice so far. Our cadence is once every 10 years, so maybe in 2030 we'll do it again.
great. Well, let's take another just short break for people to ask any questions or give us some comments. Anybody? I have no idea what your mother is doing. There's no video now, so I'm
yeah. She figured it out.
Yeah, she's figured it out. The laptop is revolting. AI is taking over your mother's home. There'll be more of that in the future, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Anybody else have a question or comment?
Hey, Scott.
Hey, how you doing, Lauren?
Good. How are you?
Good.
I was just going to say that I appreciate the kind of the partnership and comparison. Like I moved to Tampa a couple years ago and I lived in Miami for, I don't know, 14 or 15 years. And people always ask, did I like Miami? Did I love it? And I'm like, Miami was like the best partner and the worst partner. It was like the best love-hate relationship I've ever had in my entire life. And everything that you shared today just confirms that. It's like that's what Miami was for me. It was like I was in love and then I was not in love. So I get it. And, I come back to Miami pretty, regularly-ish, and I'll see something and I'll go, I think that must be Oh Miami. I can tell by there's stuff everywhere. Now when I come back, you can see stuff pretty regularly, and it's really amazing to see.
Oh, thanks. Thanks.
From the beginning, I've been from the beginning-ish to now
Yeah.
is remarkable. So anyway, I'm really glad I was able to catch this today. So it was nice to see you.
Yeah, nice seeing you. Thanks. And thanks so much. I appreciate it. I mean, yeah, I think I had two poetic responses to that. One is my friend Dave Landsberger, who also used to live here but doesn't anymore, had a poem called Miami Hates You, which is always like it really sums up, it's like a seminal poem for me because I think a lot of what I'm doing is in a similar like tone in some way or another. But the other one is that there's like this I think people outside Miami and outside Florida, I think like they can kind of sum up their feelings by the Bugs Bunny gif of, him like sawing off the state, like right at the border and just letting it float out to sea, as if like there's absolutely nothing of value to be saved, just jettison the entire enterprise. And there's, there's like a funny side to that I think we all engage in, but I think the serious side of that is, I really do think a lot of people elsewhere think like that there is nothing redeemable here, and that there's nothing there's nothing good about Florida, and that's just not true. And so I always try to be like an advocate of this state and people here, and just pointing out that like even when things are politically really bad, there's always people fighting for a better Florida and a better Miami, and they deserve your respect.
Yeah, totally. Awesome.
I hope so.
Yeah.
If you read the New York Times and the Boston Globe, read a bunch of
well, and that's and you're right, John. I mean, that's where I think a lot of it comes from, and a lot of our frustration too is the lack of nuance from media outlets elsewhere about this place, and it's like a lack of curiosity. And there are exceptions to that, but generally speaking, just when we read stuff written elsewhere about here, it doesn't ring true.
Well, maybe DeSantis and Iger should have like a wrestling Texas death match. Whoever wins,
let's do it.
Yeah, you could do it, and it could be the biggest pay-per-view. There'll be like 4 billion people watching it.
Yeah, I think in a real fight, DeSantis won't go very far. I don't think he's built for it. So I'll put my money on Iger.
Yeah. Nikki, did you want to say something, Nikki?
Yeah, I really liked that. I like that poem style that you just read. I think that more distaste for Miami, and I enjoy that. I thought it was very good, and I think that should be the topic of a lot of poetry coming from Miami, going out. I think it makes. I thought it was very clever and funny, and it has a very like Icelandic, Greenland-esque kind of thing to it. But you shouldn't obviously point out, because that's like the elephant in the room. But I'm new to this, and so I really appreciated that. There's just so, and I think I like what you said too, that a lot of what you're reading about Miami is coming from people outside of Miami, and I think that's just always going to be the case, because Miami is kind of on its it's so close to the Bermuda Triangle that things disappear here, because it's such a strange cultural fusion of places that most of what we read and write and is in the literature and the newspapers is coming from places up north, so or just like anywhere else than here.
No, it's and I think what the city though contributes to it by we're a tourism real estate town, so the stories that they want written about us are obviously like things about how great it is to visit and what a sunny place it is. But the flip side of that is that that's the only narrative we're ever putting out. And so I think when someone from elsewhere writes about us, they feel like they have to respond to that narrative first and be like, well, actually, like it's a dumpster fire.
It's cloudy down there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's sort of like we're asking for that response by the way that we talk about the city. And it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, and I think there's a lot of people and organizations who are committed to creating a different kind of narrative about the place. But it's, we don't have the money that the tourism industry has to pump that out,
Do you write a lot of your poetry for people outside of Miami, or do you think that you write for the audience within Miami?
I'm literally writing this book to read these poems at Books and Books one time. Like, that's, to me, the whole point of the book is to do the book release at Books and Books, maybe an event at the book fair, and read these poems, because I truly only wrote them for people in Miami. And like, they're I think loaded with references and codes and things that I think really only people who live here will understand. And that's why I wrote it. And if people elsewhere like it, great, but that I really don't care. It's totally written for Miami.
That's fascinating. I really, again, I said it earlier, but like, I really appreciate how much you like pour into the community, because especially since you said that studied, I guess you worked or studied externally, and then you like came back, which is, I feel like, a huge thing with Miami natives and
Mhm.
especially successful Miami natives, you kind of have to leave a little bit and see what's going on, not in the end of the continent, and then come back and be like,
Mhm.
okay, I brought some of the world, like I brought some of what's going on elsewhere back with me. Because if you're just here, you kind of just get lost,
Mhm.
like you get swallowed up by like all of the cultures, all of the countries, everything that's here. You kind of like, Miami is, it's hard to like speak to the rest of the world if you're like originally from Miami, if you don't
Mhm.
ever leave Miami, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's true. And I think it's always good to leave and come back. Which is kind of part of that, like, when I arrive at MIA poem is like, I just, the origin of that poem is that feeling of like coming back here, stepping off the plane, and literally you step off and you feel the humidity like immediately. And that smell and that feel was always like, felt like home to me, you know.
That's
So, but
funny.
you
Yeah.
have to leave to get that.
Yes. That's great. I related a lot to you saying that. It had a very like the coding, very strong feeling of mixed feelings for me, because a lot of hatred and then also love, but it's like
Yeah.
transformed over the years, which I feel like someone from up north who isn't used to like the humidity would come to
Mhm.
that, and I'd be interested in their perspective, which I'm sure there's lots of poetry written about people visiting Miami, and that humidity that you feel once you like arrive. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I mean, one of the, it's not talked about a lot, but this is a good way to connect it back to Maine, John, is the poet Robert Frost,
Yeah.
is the New England a poet as you can get, lived in Miami for 20 years towards the end of his life, in the winter, in a house that he called Pencil Pines. And there's he doesn't really have a Miami poem, but there's like a couple that I'm like, I feel like it's in there, like, but yeah, there's like a long history of writers coming from elsewhere, spending time here and writing about it, and then leaving again, which is kind of like the history of Miami in a lot of ways.
Well, I live in a 55 plus community called Highland Green, and there are a bunch of people that go down to Florida, and we've gone down to spring training for the Red Sox a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
So, but no, I like winter. I like the season. So for me, is I'm happy. But one
Yeah.
little theme you might want to notice is there is a thing about geography, like New York. If certain people talk about New York that aren't New Yorkers, there's use the word sh, fill in the blank, storm, a reaction from people talking about New York. You don't
Yeah.
know. Do I have to get in the car and mess you up? Yeah.
Mhm.
Somehow
Totally.
geography, people don't like, people get very sensitive to people talking about your geography if you're not part of it. So just an interesting
Absolutely.
item.
Absolutely. And that's, I mean, I think I'm even, because I was born and raised in Boca, which is close to Miami, but it's not Miami. I mean, it's not the same at all. And so, I mean, I also, even though I feel like an insider, I also feel like an outsider, so I feel like I kind of write from a weird position in the middle of, like, I'm of this place, but I'm not of this place like someone who was literally born and raised in West Kendall. So.
Yeah. So do you have a couple more poems to read before we have to close out?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I will read two quick ones. Yeah. Okay. So this first one is another in the My Heart, also known as series. So this is My Heart, aka a capsized yacht in Biscayne Bay. I never would have known you existed if you hadn't flipped over and began sinking right by the road, two of your four compartments drowning in the shallow yet impenetrable. Let me start that over. I never would have known you existed if you hadn't flipped over and began sinking right by the road, two of your four compartments drowning in the shallow yet impenetrable muck of the bay, which, according to recent reports, is toxic to anything that needs light or air, but still holds whatever's buoyant on its jagged surface. Case in point, the next day a man drags you to the jetty beside the curb and, using ropes and his truck as a counterweight, pulls you upright. And once again, you look like something that might leave at any moment. A mirage, a posture, a feint. Because the next day you're capsized again. Capsized being the position you prefer. You want half the world to be the sky and half to be the silt. In the end, you're incapable of pretending that you can survive for even one day outside of the place you call home.
Fantastic. Great.
Thanks. What is the last one I want to read? I'm gonna read the one that I'm not sure is done yet. That'll be a good way to end. And I think, like, on this theme of inquiry and, you know,
Yeah,
things
great.
in process, I'll read you one that is really new and I was even fiddling with this morning, so it may not be totally done, but I appreciate the chance to, like, test it out with you all. So it's called Ode to East, as in, like, the direction east. So Ode to East. What you witness in the evening is the sun's hand stretching to hang on to the east branches, the fingers turning purple from the strain as the light wakes up the throats of the roosters, the peaks of the landfills, the tips of mangroves. What we are is mornings and beginnings and birth and belief and bright pink. We're origins and setting out and ovulating and obads, and all of us in the same house at the same time, with nowhere to go for as long as the day lasts. And the day does last, because the day in the east never dies. Ode to eggs and yolks and pans and beans and seeds. Ode to ease and easel and yeast, a cell rising just by being, like us, left out. Ode to the cold breaking in half, the particles on the windshield shattering into the water's frail patterns. Ode to oceans, ode to tides, ode to the waves turning white as they arrive from where else, the east, stretching to greet us and lick our toes. Ode to stretching and diving and unraveling in the current, hand over hand on top of the continental shelf, which falls away beneath us as we go. An eastern bearing means a deepening, means meditation and mystery, devotees and devotion. Ode to not knowing what will happen after dark, other than the East's inevitable triumphant return. Ode to the horizon and how it sentences us to its ownership. Ode to the navel, ode to the sun turning orange and then red and then aftermath. Thanks.
So when do you have a date for when this new collection is going to come out, or?
No, not yet. I mean, I'm still finishing it. I'm trying to finish it by the fall, and then I'll start sending it out. And I mean, who knows what's going to happen then? It's like, then you're in the mercy of the publishing world, and yeah, who knows? So,
I mean, is that gotten better or worse post pandemic?
you know, that's a good question, and I think it depends on genre a little bit. But it seems it seems a little tougher, honestly, from what I've heard from people trying to get books out in the world and from editors who work in the publishing industry. You know, I have a friend who's coming out with a novel, his first novel, in August, and you know, I think at his press, which is not a small press, you know, they just laid off 6 people, and so I don't know. I think it might be a little tougher right now.
Yeah. Well, great. You know, thank you for now I don't have to visit Miami. I got the Florida furniture, I got
You
the
got it.
airport, I got the mango groves. I'll be ordering a capsized boat that can't be upright. You know, I got the whole thing. I got it's like a Miami treasure chest.
There
Now,
you
it's all,
go.
listen, I'm a visual person, so you gave me lots of images, and that's
Good.
what I love. Stuff that you know, fills the thought balloons with images instead of words sometimes. But no, it's great, really
Good.
fantastic. Thank you
Thanks,
again
John.
for joining us. And yeah, maybe we have to do some zip code stuff up here in the far, you know, the tundra, the frozen tundra.
You should do it. You know, Richard Blanco, who's our poet laureate. We actually have the Nicole Tallman, who's the official, like, basically poetry ambassador for Miami,
Yeah.
is here, and they recently, her and the mayor recently named a poet laureate, and it's Richard Blanco. You know, who read it?
Yeah.
You know, was it Obama's inauguration?
Yeah.
And he, you know, he lives in, or used to live in Maine for part of the
Yeah.
year. And he did zip codes with whatever the big Boston NPR station is. So there's, in
Yeah,
other words, there's
WBUR. Yeah.
yeah, there's precedent. So, you know, bring it to Maine.
Yeah.
Great
Very good.
idea.
No, thanks again.
No, thank
Thanks,
you all.
Scott, so much. It was
Thanks
wonderful.
everybody. Thanks everybody for being here, and thanks John and Wendy for making the space. I appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
Oh, great. Yeah.